Hi, everybody. Welcome to Green Friday. We start all our meetings with a land acknowledgement. Most of us live here in the East Bay of California, although I see we have visitors from other parts of the country. But as residents of the Bay Area in particular and North America in general, we have benefited and continue to benefit from the seizure and occupation of the homeland of the indigenous people in the East Bay here. That would be the Ohlone people. It is essential to recognize and honor the histories of our homes and relationships, particularly when those histories are violent and oppressive, because the past is never dead. We value community, diversity, and relationship, and so have a responsibility to make visible our relationships past and present with Indigenous peoples. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty and will work to hold our governments more accountable to the needs, material, spiritual, and relational, of American Indian and Indigenous people. This land acknowledgement is not passive permission for occupation of this land. One material way to acknowledge our history and support Indigenous communities in the Bay Area is through the Shumi land tax, a voluntary annual financial contribution that non-Indigenous people living on traditional Ohlone territory make to support the critical work of the Segura Te Land Trust. And I have put a link in the chat to the Segura Te Land Trust. You can copy that and look at it later and consider making a contribution to their land trust, just as we pay taxes, property taxes to our U.S. federal government. It's a very minor thing to support our Indigenous people. Okay, so we are fortunate tonight to have with us the 1,000 grandmothers to talk about the Green New Deal. Now, we don't have all 1,000 of them here. Many of them are, in fact, in northern Minnesota, shutting down the Enbridge tar sands pipeline. And so let's hear it for the grandmothers and for the water protectors in northern Minnesota. But a couple of them that haven't gone there are here to talk to us about the Green New Deal. I'll start by introducing Martha Kane, who is a lifelong activist, retired teacher, mother, fifth generation Californian, who is committed to creating a sustainable planet for humans and for all sentient beings. And I would add even non-sentient ones like the plants and all future generations. So Martha, I'll pass the mic to you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm one of your presenters this evening. Virginia.
Hi, I'm Virginia Morris, and I'm in unceded Lijan Ohlone territory in Oakland. And I'm a grandmother, and I'm a member of the Grandmothers for a Green New Deal. And two of us Martha and I are helping tonight to present.
And we also have Claire. Claire, will you wave, please? Claire Schoen, you're not going to hear from her this evening, but she's my tech support. So she's here joining us. So I want to thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. Virginia and I are going to be presenting, but we're counting on you to participate in this conversation and to continue the conversation beyond the borders of this Zoom, because future generations depend on it. And now I'll turn it to Virginia.
While we consider the future, we're leaving for the generations following us. We all know that we stand on the shoulders of those who've gone before us, or we're standing with someone who is by our side today. So as part of our group introductions, we'd like you to call to mind an ancestor or a living person whose spirit inspires you. Take a moment, close your eyes, and recall the spirit of this person. Okay, open your eyes now. And when I call on you, please state your name and where you're from, and please share your ancestor's name or the person who inspires you, and one or two descriptive words about them. I'll start. I'm Virginia. I'm in Oakland, and I'm honoring my father, Buck Morris, who was courageous. Let me see. Liz.
Me unmute. Yeah. Hi, I'm Liz, and the ancestor I always hearken back to is Rachel Carson.
Fabulous. Okay, Joanne.
I'm Joanne Drebeck from Oakland, and I'm honoring a dear friend, Charlotte Rieger, who is a longtime Sierra Club volunteer and a real advocate for community and environment.
Thank you. And Martha.
I'm going to honor my maternal grandmother, Alma Mahern Mahan, for her ability to listen and to encourage.
Great, thank you. Susan. I think you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Susan Quinlan, occupied Ohlone land. And the person who immediately came to my mind is Karina Gould, who is fighting very hard to rematriate the land here.
Excellent. Thank you. Mary Sue.
Oh, I'm Mary Sue. The person who came to mind was my paternal grandmother, Eunice Meads. And the reason she was never flummoxed about things, but she solved a lot of problems. And she was quite an amazing craftsperson and cook, and did everything. She did all kinds of things. And she loved camping and being in the outdoors.
Great. Thank you. Betty.
Betty, do you know how to unmute yourself?
Betty, there's a button down in the left that says mute, and you just hit it and it unmutes. On the lower left.
She's on an iPad.
Why don't we come back to Betty, Virginia?
Betty, we'll come back to you. Okay, we'll come back to you and see if we can teach you to unmute. Oh, there you are. Are you unmuted?
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Good.
I'm honoring my mother, who was an activist, lived a long life, and I'm copying her because I'm in my 90s.
Wow.
Wow. Okay. Excellent. All right. Next person. We'll do Mary, Kane, and Lisa in sequence. You go, Mary.
Well, Martha's my sister, and she honored my maternal grandmother, and I will honor Mavis, my mother.
Okay. Lisa.
I'd like to honor my friend Annie McCleary, who passed away 2 years ago. Was an amazing herbalist in Vermont and instigated the idea of green burials in the area.
Wow. Thank you. Cheryl Larson.
I would like to honor Tony Locke, a former neighbor and editor of a local newspaper, and ultimately Mother of the Year in Oakland, a longtime activist who died in her mid-90s a couple of years ago.
Thank you. Joy. Can you unmute, Joy?
Yeah, but I came in late, so I don't know what the assignment is.
Oh, okay. Think of an ancestor or someone that's beside you today, or someone who came before you who's an ancestor that inspired you, and give us a couple of words about them. If you want to come back later, take some time right now. I'll call on you after.
Okay, I'll come back later.
Okay. Christine.
I think for me, I'll honor my mother, Alida, with whom I went camping as a kid, who started me recycling from, before I ever, just from day one. Taught me the love of nature and the beauty of the earth.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay. LK Mohawk.
Hi, I'm Constance McKnight. I'm honoring my father, Charles Edward McKnight. He combined a passion for science with a passion for the environment and nature, and taught me and my brother to love nature. And he gave an early paper on global warming at an Army conference of engineers. And basically his concern about that was completely ignored. And he died not knowing. I wish he could have lived long enough to see how much people care about that issue now.
Great, that's fantastic. Maybe he can see.
I believe
Sue,
he can. I believe he can.
maybe he can. Sue. Have we lost you, Sue?
She's on mute.
Okay, Sue, can you unmute yourself?
Sue, me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. My name is Sue, and I've been thinking of my mother because when I was a little girl, she understood. I let her know that out in the barn, I had collected a spider zoo, caught spiders, put them in jars, and had them create their webs. And she didn't freak out. She thought that was wonderful. So, and anytime I brought home a snake or a turtle, I had to give it up, but she took a look at it and thought it was okay. So she supported me.
Excellent. Thank you, Sue. Okay, Doug. I think we need you to unmute, Doug.
I'm Doug. I'm zooming in from Bethel Island in the ancestral land of the Bay Miwok. And I get to once again honor John Muir. Enough said.
Thank you. I think we might need you to turn up your computer's volume a little.
We did hear John Muir.
Let me try that again.
Yes, we did. Okay, thank you.
I'm Doug, zooming in from Bethel Island in the California Delta, ancestral land of the Bay Miwok, and I honor John Muir.
Thank you. Okay. Raina.
Hi, I'm Raina. I'm honoring my dad, who was recycling and composting before it was cool, and he still is.
Fantastic.
And I'm in the East Bay of the on Ohlone land.
Thank you. And we'll come back to you, Joy. Now, do you have a person in mind? Unmute.
Yeah, I guess I can say my parents, both of them, although they were not activists at all in any sense of the word, really, but they lived simply. I don't think my mother ever used a paper towel. And my father used to collect cans and turn them in that were in the neighborhood. So they had some kind of awareness, but it was not of an activist sort, except that they really exemplified simple living without actually being conscious of it.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. And thank you all for sharing. I can feel
Virginia?
more. Yes,
Virginia. We also have Dorothy here.
Oh, Dorothy. Sorry, Dorothy. Do you have a person? Did you hear what we're remembering now?
Yes. Listening to others honor their parents in various ways. I might have chosen that, but I chose the woman who influenced me considerably. She's a Methodist clergywoman, Sharon Delgado, who was concerned about environmental issues starting in the 90s. And she inspired me considerably. And I also want to echo those who were honoring where we all are sitting in Chochenyo Ohlone land.
Thank you, Dorothy. Sorry, didn't see you till Martha pointed you out.
That's
if
why
this
I'm here.
happens again, Martha, let me know if I miss anybody. And what we're going to do is we're going to need everyone's energy moving forward, including those people we just mentioned. Go ahead, Martha.
Okay, so just a couple of technical things. We'd like everyone to be in gallery view so that we can have this conversation together. And I understand some people might want to have their cameras off for different reasons, but if you feel inspired to keep it on, that would be great. We encourage people to unmute themselves unless there's noise in your background, because then it's easier when we do converse. We don't have to remind you to unmute yourself. We won't use the chat a lot, but if you feel inspired, put something in chat, and we will use it a couple of times in the middle and at the end. And the last thing is, if you're someone who doesn't normally talk, please step up. And if you're someone who tends to talk a lot, we definitely still want to hear from you, but just, you know, kind of be conscious of sharing the space. So I'm going to start by sharing our agenda, and then I'm going to speak to you briefly about a couple of adjustments on that screen. Just a sec here. Okay. So you should be seeing our agenda up on your screen. And to maximize your view of our media tonight, there's a little, at the top of your screen, there's a green bar that says you are sharing Liz Dodge's screen or something like that. And then to the right of that, there's a little tab that says view options. We encourage you to choose fit to window and side-by-side mode. You can play around with it, see what works best, but that'll be the most effective way for the segments we're going to show tonight. Okay, that's it, Virginia. Go ahead.
Okay, so we see the Green New Deal as a blueprint for a sustainable future. Today's 90-minute workshop is structured around our 17-minute video called A Path Forward. The video is in 4 segments today, as you see from the agenda projected on your screen. We will stop in between each segment to discuss issues, ask you questions, and hear your ideas. Martha, please play the first segment of the video, The Need for Movement, Youth Leadership, Elder Allies.
Okay, just a minute here and I will share it. Here we go.
The COVID pandemic, Black Lives Matter. It feels like the world's been turned upside down.
And of course, there's the climate crisis, threatening the support systems of life on Earth. We don't have much time left to put the brakes on that one.
But we're beginning to see all these problems through a new lens, and to understand that the 3 crises of pandemic, racial injustice, and climate are connected.
The Green New Deal is showing us a path forward.
It says that the only real way to tackle the climate crisis is to transform the very foundations of our economy.
So we'd like to tell you about the Green New Deal, a remarkably ambitious and visionary proposal.
At the end, there are some things that you can do right now to spread the word and light a fire under our government.
We are Grandmothers for a Green New Deal, a group of elder women who care fiercely about our grandchildren and the world we are leaving them.
All of us are being hit by the climate crisis, but people of color, like some of my family, are most vulnerable. So I worry in particular about the future of young people, like my granddaughter.
I'm not a grandmother in the biological sense, but like all of us, I see my job as protecting the world's children, including my students, of course.
My granddaughter gets what's going on. At age 12, she calls the climate crisis an apocalypse. And as a Korean American, she understands that our country's racial inequalities are central to climate justice.
My grandbaby is still a bit young to carry her own protest sign, but we're working on it.
What's amazing is that young people around the world, like Greta Thunberg, are actually leading the climate movement today. Here are some of the others.
Varshini Prakash helped write Biden's climate policy.
The Green New Deal fundamentally is a solution that meets the scope and scale and urgency of the climate crisis without leaving any person behind. That's all it is.
A new generation is taking over at 350.org, one of the biggest climate groups worldwide.
We are fighting for environmental justice, which in plain English is jobs, infrastructure, and human health.
Some of these young people, like Hannah Estrada, are still in high school.
We really need you guys to understand how important this is, because depending on what you do right now, that's how future generations are going to remember you. As the generation who either did something and backed us up, or as the generation who left us in the dust.
One path forward is the Green New Deal.
The vision behind the Green New Deal is as big as the crisis it's addressing. For starters, it calls for a full transition to renewable energy by 2030.
But it also demands health, education, and housing for everyone, environmental protection, full employment or a guaranteed income, justice and equality for all.
And that everyone has a say in how all that happens.
Just to be clear, the Green New Deal is not legislation, but a resolution that could be the basis for a lot of legislation if we can get our leaders behind it.
It's being championed in the House by AOC, that's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and by Ed Markey in the Senate. And so far, it has substantial backing in the House and growing numbers in the Senate.
Right now, what the Green New Deal needs is a groundswell of support to build these numbers.
As a grandmother, mindful of the human family, I need to be part of this effort.
Okay, so this first segment of the video goes over some of the details of the Green New Deal and the organizations and leadership behind it, with younger people leading the charge. And it emphasizes the need to build a groundswell of support. So I don't know if any of you have seen this recent book. It's a wonderful book on time and water. It's by an Icelandic author, Andri Magnusson, and he writes, because of climate chaos, an entire generation is being asked not what they want to become, but what they need to become. So we would like to hear from you. What have you heard from young people that you know, or maybe you have children or grandchildren? What have you heard from them? What's their reaction to what's going on? Anybody? And you can just do this kind of raising your hand, the old school style. Mary Sue?
I don't hear a lot positively from my young person, but how our generation is really screwing things up and they have to live with it. And it's harder. And a lot of things are much harder for them than when we were growing up.
Thank you, Mary Sue. Christine, I saw your hand.
Yeah, they're really depressed about it. Like it.
Hard. Other thoughts? Lisa?
I've just heard some young people say, what good, what good is it? We're all gonna just burn up anyway. And that's very disheartening.
This is Dorothy. There are a couple, well, three families in my family clan who I feel are at least making some attempts with, two of the families have electric vehicles, all electric, and a couple of them have pretty extensive solar panels. So I see some action being taken and others talking about it, but it is hard to find things people feel like it will make a difference. Hard to convince people that things that they do can make a difference, in my experience. But then I'm kind of old. I'm 90 and I'm a great grandmother to 4 great grandkids.
Thank you, Dorothy. Any other thoughts from anyone? Mary Sue, did you want to add something?
See a lot of hands up. Well, I was thinking part of our problem is modeling what we think we should be doing, like riding a bike. And there are a lot of people now who are riding their bikes when they can. And lucky for me, I live low enough where it's easy to do without a lot of hills. But just little things that we try to do, we have to tell people why, like using the clothesline for drying clothes seems to be an effective thing to do, at least here when there's no rain. But little things that we do, tell other people about it. Well, you don't have to buy a bottle to shampoo your hair. There's a nice bar of soap that'll do it, and it's no waste. And get these messages out, little things, and they are little, but if enough people take notice, they become a statement. And maybe writing to some of the manufacturers about how they can help us too. Less packaging, less this. Yeah.
Mary, I see your hand.
Yeah. I got a lovely compliment from my daughter, Madeline. And she said that people comment often, wow, Madeline, you're really encouraging us to be better citizens to the planet. He was using vinegar and soap to get the weeds out from the concrete where in our car park, but lots of different things. And, I was honoring my mother, who was absolutely an activist and a gardener in such a lovely way. And it just comes through the bloodline, but it feels really good. I don't feel like I've done enough, but certainly what I have done is made it so that my kids have a real respect for the small and large creatures and the plants, and that they carry it through to their generation is heartening to me, and hopefully that continues with even more potent action.
Thanks for saying that, because I think it's really important to look at the things that we are doing to kind of praise the small successes and just keep at it little by little by little. And it's also true that, there's also anger and ambivalence and avoidance, which is natural because, we're coping with climate trauma. I mean, we really all are, even if we don't necessarily think about that. So with that, Virginia, I'm going to turn it to you.
Yes, the next segment of the video, The Time Is Now, Mobilizing the Government, is a longer segment, which will be followed by a longer discussion. Martha.
Let's look at the science behind climate change to understand why this is so very important right now.
The Industrial Revolution kick-started the modern era. It was fueled, literally, by cheap, plentiful energy from burning coal, and then oil, and then natural gas, all of which are composed largely of carbon. Burning all this fossil fuel sent tremendous amounts of carbon dioxide, CO2, and other gases into the atmosphere. These gases form a shield in the atmosphere which traps heat from being released, so the air around the planet heats up like a greenhouse. By 2018, we'd heated up the planet by an additional 1 degree Celsius. That's about 2 degrees Fahrenheit.
But the world keeps pumping more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and the temperature keeps rising. 1 degree doesn't sound like much, but it's already causing havoc around the world.
That's because all this warming air and water is melting the ice caps, changing the jet stream, causing sea level rise, and a lot more. These changes to the planet's systems are themselves creating big impacts, like megafire, drought, floods, and hurricanes, and these weather impacts are affecting our health and livelihood.
In short, global warming is creating a global emergency.
Sometimes it just feels overwhelming. My response is to find the strength, compassion, wisdom, and hopefully humor to push for solutions, like the Green New Deal. So now let's zero in. What exactly does the Green New Deal say?
Well, the goal is net zero by 2030. That means that there is as much carbon being absorbed by the trees, soil, and other carbon sinks as the amount of carbon that is being released into the atmosphere.
How will we do this?
Well, we have to stop burning fossil fuels and get solar, wind, and other renewable power online quickly, a lot of it, and ramp up our research and development for other clean, zero-emission solutions. We also need to create a smart power grid that's energy efficient and decentralized to deliver this power.
All of this is in the Green New Deal resolution.
And the Green New Deal says we'll need big changes in our transportation system too, including affordable electric public transportation, swapping out our gas guzzlers for electric cars, and charging stations in all neighborhoods to make all this run.
The resolution says we'll also need changes in construction, like making our buildings energy and water efficient.
All these steps will lessen the damage brought on by climate change. But we also have to protect people and cities from climate impacts that it is too late to stop.
The Green New Deal calls for resilient cities, especially in low-income communities, so that cities can adapt to extreme weather events brought on by the climate crisis.
But solar panels and windmills are only one part of the puzzle, and here's why. Along with the climate crisis, we're also facing a lot of other critical issues, including income inequality, healthcare, education, housing, and jobs. When I got involved in the climate movement, I started to understand that all these social problems are actually part of the climate emergency. So, the Green New Deal argues that in order to tackle the climate crisis, we have to deal with all these interrelated issues.
When I think about the effects that climate change will have, I guess the impact on our health is the first thing that comes to mind. And as we've all learned, the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed critical weaknesses and inequality in our healthcare system. So, the Green New Deal includes universal healthcare for everyone in the U.S. High-quality healthcare is a right, not a privilege.
Then there are jobs. Farming, fishing, and forestry are most at risk due to the climate crisis.
This is really big. Climate change threatens 1.2 billion jobs worldwide. What will that mean for my children, my grandchildren, this whole generation?
But the transition to a clean energy system can create a bounty of new jobs. So jobs are another big focus of the Green New Deal. It calls for millions of high-wage jobs with good benefits, including paid family and medical leave, paid vacations, and a secure retirement. It also demands workplace health and safety. It says that workers must have the right to unionize.
And it calls for a just transition. That means that as we move away from a fossil fuel-based economy, a lot of workers are going to lose their jobs in those industries. We have to ensure that they get the retraining and new jobs they will need so they don't get left behind.
How about education? Underfunded schools are not educating our children well. So how can they learn the science and critical thinking skills they'll need to tackle the tough climate challenges ahead? The Green New Deal sees a good education, including higher education, as part of the climate solution.
Then there's infrastructure and housing. Like most of America's major cities, the airport, sewage treatment system, and bridge ramps where I live are all built along the water, and they are all threatened by sea level rise. The Green New Deal? It requires affordable and safe housing for everyone in the U.S.
Agriculture. Floods are washing away fertile soil, while droughts are reducing crop yields.
So farming is part of the Green New Deal too, supporting family farms to create a sustainable system so that everyone has healthy, affordable food.
Biodiversity is being ravaged by climate change around the world. For instance, warming seas and sea level rise have caused the loss of half the world's coral reefs in the last 30 years.
Half the world's reefs in 30 years. I was astonished by that figure.
And 500 million people depend on coral reefs for food, income, and coastal protection.
So environmental protection also factors into the Green New Deal. It says that everyone has a right to clean air, water, and access to nature. And we have to restore and protect threatened and fragile ecosystems.
So this last segment covered a lot. It gave us a very basic history and the science behind climate change. It shows how just a few degrees of warming can have tremendous impact on the planet. It discussed some of the technological changes we need to make. And finally, it pointed out the weaknesses in our current practices and suggested changes that we need to make as a society. And for all of us, it's becoming increasingly clear that climate change is here now. It's no longer about the future. We'd like to take a poll. Raise your hand, please. How many of you have been personally affected by any of these? And keep your hands up. Mega fires and smoke?
Oh, yeah.
Floods or hurricane? Thank you. Drought or heat? Extreme cold? Okay. Question. After these experiences and 30 years of information about climate change, why isn't the whole country crying from the rooftops about this global emergency? Anyone? I'll just call on you. Sue?
Change is hard. You know, people, but the thing is, our human nature, our genome, is wired to change habits. Otherwise, we wouldn't have adapted from, 200,000 years ago to today. So even though people are frightened of change, overreact to change, little change, and they get crazy, it can be done.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sue. Someone else?
I think a lot of people I know think they can't do enough to make a difference, so why try? And they don't want to think about the accumulative fact of, if everybody gave up eating half the beef or pork and lamb that we eat, one person's dietary change might not make a difference, but you do that for 200 million people across the United States, it's going to make an impact. And if you do it across the 7 billion people, how many billion people are in the world now? It would make a difference. I know a lot of people don't have the access to have that food source. It would make a difference. And people also, it's sort of like when Jimmy Carter said, keep your house at 68 and put on a sweater. A lot of people said, well, why bother, kind of thing. It's they don't want to change their lifestyle. They don't realize that you can go green and still be comfortable.
Right. Thank you. Very good point.
Virginia, I saw Constance.
You saw Constance, okay.
Go ahead, Constance.
Well, a big thing that would make a big change would be stopping the use of fossil fuels. And a lot of people are making a lot of money by using fossil fuels, and they've done everything to resist that change as much as possible. So our whole society is set up in order to, help people make a lot of money off of fossil fuels.
Right. That's as we know, this is a big challenge. Is there someone else down there? Let's see.
I see Mary's hand.
Dorothy.
Wouldn't it be a boost if the government would step in now and help fund the creation of stations for electric vehicles to be recharged? That if all those were available in most convenient places, people would be encouraged to do that. My pastor at the church in Berkeley actually hoped that we could establish one at our church, but we don't have enough space for all the cars to line up and wait for their turn, kind of thing. But people could come to church and charge their cars.
Yes.
But if the government stepped in and made that more feasible, that would be one thing that could happen.
Absolutely. Yes. Is there someone else with their
Yeah, I
hand?
saw Mary's hand.
Mary.
Mary, muted.
The power structures are such that, you know, the fossil fuel companies are still getting billions of dollars worth of subsidies. And so we have to get up on the rooftops and we have to do what we can do, plug in at our house if that's what we need to do. I have a hybrid electric, so I can get full electric, but I can't, you know, but I have a hybrid in between. But the encouraging thing is that although the society here in the United States is terribly resistant, a lot of countries in Europe have made much bigger leaps and bounds on alternatives and creative ways of creating energy and using energy. So it's about encouraging those around us that are afraid of socialism. I saw something today that somebody's sign about socialism sucks and Biden blows is what this said. But talking about how important it is to work collectively to solutions, which is
excellent point. Excellent point. Is there anyone else?
Yeah, Virginia, Christina's had her hand up and I see Raina's raised her hand too. So
Let's go Christina first, then Raymond.
I think the subsidies that are given to the fossil fuel extractors, the meat producers, the government is in the hands of lobbyists, it seems. And I also think our representative system is not really very representative anymore in terms of the balance of powers, and that whole political system just seems like it gives that there's so many more Democrats across the country, and yet it's not balanced in government. And I think that has a big thing to do with it too. I'll shut up.
Yeah. All good points. Yes. And where are you, Raymond?
Raina.
Oh, Raina. It was Raina. Oh, okay.
Yes, hi. I just wanted to say I agree with everyone's points, and my concern is, relying on trying to change individual minds, which I think is great. However, I think unless we get systemic change by, trying to force the government to do something about it and corporations, that we're not going to get far enough in time. So my concern is I feel like with the pipelines, there needs to be direct action and forcing, having enough people get together. It doesn't have to be everybody, it's just enough people to move the government towards, and the people in power who can actually make sweeping change. So I'm all for individual action, but I'm also concerned that we can get, people who make laws and people and corporations to move the needle farther than individuals can, if that makes sense. I mean, obviously that's made up of individuals, but.
Yeah, we need to mobilize the whole country. Yes.
Right.
Martha, is there someone else we are not seeing yet?
I think, it's Betty, do you have your hand up?
I do. There isn't anything that's been mentioned in relation to the Green New Deal that I disagree with. But there's an aspect of this that really bothers me, and I wonder if people take this into consideration. More than half of our discretionary budget goes to the Pentagon. You think of all the pollution that war produces and so forth. And I don't hear this issue tied in with all of education, healthcare, all of the things that I believe in, and the simple lifestyle that I try to lead. But that's that's just a thought that bugs me, and I had to voice. Thank you.
That's very good. And the Poor People's Campaign is bringing that issue big time on the 21st in North Carolina. We just had a rally here about that. So yes, that lowering the defense budget is a huge issue, and you're absolutely right. Thank you, Betty. I think Martha, it's your turn, right?
Yeah, I'm going to step in here because we'll keep having this conversation. You guys are so good at anticipating things that we want to get to. But, so there's a lot of things that are holding people back. It sounds like we emphasize a lot of the systemic things that are kind of holding us back from, some of the things that will make these changes possible. And it's, these catastrophic futures and imagining them can cause some anxiety. But you're a group that thinks in a forward way. And interestingly, so was the Trump-appointed Commodity Futures Trading Commission. I'm going to share a slide with you that they published in a report in September of 2020. I'm getting to that slide. My cursor's giving me a little problem here. Here we go. Okay, so this screen here that you see was the result of a report that they made. And basically what they said, if we do not take action in decarbonizing the US grid, if we do take action, it'll cost us 4.5 trillion. That's a lot of money. However, if we don't take action, by 2050, it's going to cost us somewhere between 50 and 140 trillion. So if you look at the lower left-hand side of your screen, there's a little tiny red bar. That represents 4.5 trillion. If we, over the next 50 years, don't take action, this bar up here on the right-hand side represents 140 trillion. So this was a Trump-appointed commission that came to the conclusion that we need to take action. And that's encouraging that they came up with that report. I can't see you to call on you, but if you have any questions about this, ask them. I'm going to go to the next slide here. Can you all see that? The one that says emissions? Virginia, is that working?
Yep, I can see it. Anybody else? Everybody else can see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the positive news is that there are organizations like Project Drawdown, which you may have heard of. This is where this next slide comes from. This is where experts are drilling down and outlining the details of what needs to occur to reduce CO2 emissions. And so you see the slide, they've broken out that 25% is electricity, 24% is food, agriculture, 21% industry, 14% that are creating the emissions. And then on the right-hand side, we see that about 40%, or actually, yeah, about 40% is absorbed by the land and the coast, but the other roughly 60% is our problem. And so what they're recommending is represented in this screen here. On the top row, they're saying, we need to make a shift in production and enhance our efficiency. We need to shift our agricultural practices. We heard folks allude to that, changing our diets. We need to address refrigerants. We need to start using electric vehicles. We've been talking about that, efficient buildings. And then also a really important thing is that we need to use our land better and address the issues that are going on on our coasts and in our oceans, which are sinks for the emissions. And then over on the right, improve society. So I'm going to stop sharing that. But Claire, can you put the link to Project Drawdown in the chat? If you're not familiar with Project Drawdown, it's a great source for kind of digging in a little deeper. Does anyone have any comments or questions about these slides that I showed? Okay, so Virginia.
Let's see a show of
Doug
hands.
has a question, yeah.
Oh, yes, question, go.
Project Drawdown has a very easily understood, concise series of 5 videos that lays out things in an enjoyable, digestible time frame.
Good to know.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Doug. Okay.
Appreciate that.
Let me see a show of hands. How many of you were involved in either writing or calling voters in advance of the 2020 November election or in the Georgia runoff? Fantastic. Almost everybody. This is the outcome of our efforts to mobilize the government. Martha, we have a slide.
Okay, just let me get to that.
It shows the leaders of Biden's climate team. How will the makeup of this team help tie climate solution and a social agenda? Call out your answers because I can't see you because we've got the slide up. Anybody?
Diverse.
They all will blend the economy with the solutions.
Exactly. And the climate.
And the
Yes.
climate, yeah, but yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Is there anybody else?
Deb Holland, who's the Secretary of the Interior, is a Native American woman. And I read some of her statements and I couldn't be happier. There couldn't be a better person.
Yes, fantastic. Somebody else? We've got Marty Walsh, Secretary of Labor, big union guy. We've got Jennifer Granholm, Secretary of Energy, promoting net zero carbon. We got 2 climate czars whose job is to coordinate all departments with climate goals: John Kerry, Global Climate Envoy, and Gina McCarthy, National. And Janet Yellen, Treasury Secretary, and Brian Deese, National Economic Council, a climate guy. And Michael Regan, EPA, deep environmental experience. And I think we got a lot. And Brenda Mallory, Council on Environmental Quality, environmental lawyer. And then last but not least, Pete Buttigieg, Secretary of Transportation. So as you know, Biden doesn't use the term Green New Deal. It became toxic for him during the election. He calls his plan Build Back Better. It focuses on green jobs and infrastructure. So we see the Green New Deal as the moral North Star, or the blueprint of what legislation should look like moving forward. Out of the roots of the Green New Deal, several other initiatives like Build Back Better have emerged, including the Red, Black, and Green New Deal and the Thrive Agenda. What do you know about any of these initiatives? Anyone?
Not much.
Okay, well, briefly, here's what we can tell you. The Red, Black, and Green New Deal focuses on the impact of climate change on Black communities globally. And in the US, they're organizing a national Black climate agenda. A number of climate groups have organized themselves under the banner of the Thrive Agenda, which, like Build Back Better, focuses on green jobs and a just transition for workers in the fossil fuel industry. Do any of you have anything you would like to add to this?
Is anyone tuned into the Thrive Agenda or the Red, Black, and Green New Deal? Okay, well, I think we can leave it at that, Virginia.
Okie doke. Because of the scope of the Green New Deal, we believe, as symbolized on the slide that we just showed you, by the open doorway, that there are many portals through which to enter and forward the work of the Green New Deal. Please think about which part of this work best suits you. Martha.
Yeah, so the big question is always the same. How are we going to pay for it?
Tax the rich.
Good. I mean, I think Betty raised that when she raised the idea of cutting the military budget.
That would be a good start.
Other
We waste a lot of money on bad ideas too. And so maybe somebody's more careful about how money is spent and where it's directed, which would include cutting the military budget, which was more than they asked for in the first place, and things like that. But getting people better educated is really important. And they say, why can't we do it? When I went to college here in California, it cost $135 or $150 a semester, period. It was called an incidental fee. No, they did it then. They could do it again and provide it for people and just bring these topics up, especially because the kids are really aware of the dim future they may face if nothing is done, if they're alive to face it.
The tax structure is going to have to change for this to happen. Cut the military, and they just things
does
have
mean
changed
pressure
so
on the
much.
Yeah.
Mary, were you going to say something?
I really liked the picture that you put up of Trump's study. If you don't fix the hole in the roof, you're going to ruin the whole house. So where's the money coming from? I don't know, but you better fix the hole in the roof unless you want to lose the whole house. That idea of we better find that money, because if we don't, the tarp's not going to last long.
Yeah, very good.
There seem to be a lot of problems of getting there. Yeah.
Anyone else?
One small way that one can approach this is to heavily support things like Americans Friends Service Committee. They have very well-trained lobbyists who work against military expenditures and all the rest of those things. And I don't have, at my age, the energy to be able to do a lot of individual things, but that's where I can put my support.
Yes, obvious.
I think Joy had her hand up, Virginia.
Joy?
Yeah, I think the term Green New Deal is still toxic, unfortunately. And I'm just wondering if renaming might help the cause. I mean, it's toxic among many conservatives, but there might be people who might consider it if it didn't have that label.
Yes, Martha, did you want me to go on here now, or?
Yeah, go ahead and move on. I mean, I think Joy raises a good point, and I think that's part of the reason why we have Build Back Better and the Thrive agenda.
Yeah, exactly. It's really a tricky issue, and the Democratic National Committee dealt with it during the election. And to address the climate emergency, of course, we all need to step up, and we need an organized effort by government, as several people have pointed out. It's not just enough with individuals to mobilize resources and provide leadership in the face of the current threats to the nation and the planet. The good news is that the US government has done this before, in the Depression, the mobilization for World War II, and mobilizing against COVID. What was it about these earlier efforts that led to success, and what did they all have in common? Anyone?
Anxiety about what's going to happen if they don't step in and do their part. I think people are very nervous, and we are too.
Common threat. Yep. Anything else?
And the threat was really visible. it seemed more tangible, I think. I wasn't alive for those, like the war, but they were, where climate change is very untangible to most of us, especially in the developed countries. People in the valley are still watering their crops. They don't have the dry lands that they have in Africa. People on the coast are still, at least the West Coast, are still above floodwaters where, Miami is flooding and other parts of the world are flooding. But there isn't enough physical impact for people to think of it as real.
Yeah, I hear you. Exactly.
I think that's changing because we're having more impact constantly now. But
Yeah.
I've seen one thing is that we're seeing a lot more discussion happening in the newspapers and such. So it's making people think about it right now, as opposed to always having to think that, well, it's not here, it's later on. And I think when the summer comes with 110 and 15-degree temperatures in many areas, that's a clue.
Yeah.
Right. People reach the breaking point.
Constance has her hand up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Constance.
You're muted.
You're muted, Constance. Can you click your mute button, Constance?
We can't hear you.
I got it now.
Girl, okay.
Sorry. I did the whole mute thing. Yeah, so the COVID-19 thing, people saw a definite health connection very quickly. And the use of fossil fuels has caused huge health problems, but we've been willing to just accept that. Our society has just accepted that we have a huge rate of cancer, heart disease, asthma, respiratory illness. I think if our society turned around and said health is more important, that would be a big thing to make a big difference.
Great point. Exactly. Well, I'm just going to say before we put the next segment, we've learned from COVID that we are all in this together. When a critical number of people also recognize that climate change is an existential crisis, or we reach a breaking point, we have a chance at beginning to turn this crisis around. The next section of the video is about the most challenging part of the Green New Deal, acknowledging environmental racism and creating climate justice and equity. That will require all hands on deck. Martha. What I've come to understand is that a lot of these problems are based on income inequality, which is actually higher today than any time since the Great Depression.
And it is the frontline communities, including indigenous peoples,
Communities of color,
migrant communities,
women,
the elderly,
the unhoused,
people with disabilities,
and youth, who often bear the brunt of the climate catastrophe.
For one thing, toxic refineries and other industrial sites are usually located in Black and brown communities. And rates of asthma, cancer, and heart disease in these neighborhoods are often sky high. And these underlying health issues make COVID-19 more lethal. This is environmental racism.
Meanwhile, corporations and billionaires are spending hundreds of millions of dollars to influence legislation and to support politicians who will vote for their interests,
including their interest in fossil fuel extraction.
So the Green New Deal puts a big emphasis on justice and equality for all people living in the U.S., especially these vulnerable communities.
And in particular, for Indigenous peoples, it demands informed consent for all decisions that affect their traditional territories.
The developed countries like ours, our governments and industry that created and benefit from this problem, bear a great responsibility.
but everyone has a right to be part of the solution.
I'm glad that the Green New Deal says we must listen to frontline communities. That will create better solutions. And bringing everyone to the table gives everyone a stake in the outcome.
Okay, racism has been with us a long time, and now with the term environmental racism, more Americans are beginning to realize that we're all in this together. We want to share with you a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King. Do we have a slide, Martha?
I'm getting there, just a sec.
Okay.
The arrow, there we go.
Thank you. In his last book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community, Dr. King didn't mince words on the state of racial relations and what needed to be done to fight for justice. What he said still applies today. Whites, it must frankly be said, are not putting in a similar mass effort to re-educate themselves out of their racial ignorance. It is an aspect of their sense of superiority that the white people of America believe they have so little to learn. Okay, so any reactions to this quote and its relevance when it comes to environmental racism? Please just call out because I can't see you, can't see all of you.
Well, I think it's true. I had a roommate in Cuba for a week from Michigan who was African American and constantly worried about her son. She said, you know, I don't know what to tell him about it because young men, African American men, are shot so much by the police and harassed. It was, and you know, I don't remember having any issues like that with my son. And you just don't realize it because we go along our life until it's in your face. Well, it's in their face all the time, and it's a huge problem. But we need to see more of it, and we are, you know, beginning to get aware of those things, but not
Thank
because
you.
they're not fighting.
Yeah. Thank you, Mary Sue. Is there anyone else I can't see behind the slide?
This is Betty. I'd like to say something.
Yes, Betty.
I have been concerned about this issue for a long time, but I continue to learn about new aspects of it. And the most recently thing that I heard was on Democracy Now! On June the 3rd, when she interviewed the person who has put out a new book that has to do with the connection between the Second Amendment, gun rights, and racism. And that connection had never occurred to me before. And I'm just calling this to your attention. I have insisted all of my family members to listen to that program to learn what they've done in terms of the research to write this book on that subject.
Is that Carol Anderson? Is that the name of that woman who did the research? Carol Anderson?
I don't know. Do you know, Betty?
I can't tell you. I'm not sure.
Okay, Carol Anderson is who you think, Dorothy?
And it's called The Second. And then there's something, I believe that's correct, if this is one she's speaking of.
Yeah, I've seen the title. I don't know the name of the, okay, Carol Anderson. All right. Well, we have another slide. We have another diagram, which is, some of you may have heard or read Ibrahim Kendi's recent book, How to Become an Anti-Racist. Becoming anti-racist is possibly the most challenging part of the Green New Deal resolution. There we are. Okay. We can't make significant progress on the climate crisis without confronting racism. Becoming anti-racist is a journey. Let's take a look at the diagram. Where do you see yourself on this journey? There are 4 different zones. Anyone?
Learning zone.
The learning zone.
Learning zone. Okay. Anyone else? Don't be shy. I just can't see you right now because I'm looking at the slide.
Raina has her hand up.
Okay, go Raina.
I think I'm learning and growing at the same time, which seems weird, but I do things in both of those zones. So I think it's just a lifelong process though. So I think, I don't think, I think you can go in and out of the zones because I think it's a lifetime work.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think it's a destination where we just get to growth and that's it. Like for white people, I think it's a lifetime project.
Absolutely.
There's so
Very
much.
good. Dorothy.
I also recommend Isabel Wilkerson's Cast.
Yes, I've heard of that too. I don't know. Do we have it in our packet, Martha?
I don't think we do, but certainly should be, the packet could be huge.
I'm part of a reading group and we've done both of those books, and I think Cast has a lot to tell us.
Thank you, Dorothy. Fantastic. Is there anyone else I can't see right now?
Virginia,
Okay.
I'll comment that striving to be comfortable, which is in the fear zone, I think that I almost always have a foot in that zone, even if I'm in the learning zone sometimes too.
And does that take you backwards?
Yeah,
Yeah.
starting backwards.
Yeah. Right. I wonder if anyone sees a parallel between the journey to become an anti-racist and our journey around the Green New Deal and environmental issues.
I do.
Who is that? Mary.
End of denial.
There you go. Right. It's not enough to not be a polluter of the environment. We have to be pro-environment in order to mobilize the government. So
recognize your privilege.
Yes.
Talk about that.
Yes.
To the people of privilege that you interact with.
Very good. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay, Martha.
Okay, so the movement to address the climate crisis is also starting to recognize the leadership of Indigenous people and Indigenous communities as water protectors. And here we see the water protectors protesting the fossil fuel pipelines crossing their lands on here at the Great Lakes. I'm wondering, I'm sure among you are some who are aware of the pipeline struggles that have been going on. I'm going to stop sharing here for a minute. We got some good news the other day. Susan, you want to share it?
The number 3 pipeline, I think they're not fracking there, but there's still others. I mean, there's an organization that I subscribe to that gives me the news about that. But I think there's a pipeline 1 and a pipeline 2, and I don't know my stuff. I don't have it in front of me, but anyways, we haven't won yet, but it shows it can be won by mobilizing.
It was KXL actually. KXL was the one that was killed.
In their best interest.
Yeah.
You know, there is a sense that they want to be identified with not fracking. It's good for the economy. So it shows that, you know, not just by putting the government in place, but by putting where we invest our money and how people invest their money, they see it's important. So if we speak out and organize, it works.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a local group called Grandmothers for something who just went to that area to meet with the grandmothers up there against Pipeline 3.
Right. Yeah, actually, the thousand grandmothers went up there with the some Cheyenne River grandmothers. Yes.
Right.
Well, just to clarify, so the Dakota Access Pipeline is still under construction.
That's right.
The XL pipeline is the one that was stopped the other day. Really great news. And then there's the Enbridge Line 3, and that is the struggle that the Thousand Grandmothers went to help with in Minnesota. We're going to talk more about it at the very end. And thanks to Liz, you may have noticed on our previous slide that the SHUMI that is giving to paying a tax for those of us who are living on Indigenous land was mentioned, as well as the movement for Black Lives. And then locally, we have the founder of Green the Church, which stands at the intersection of the living in Berkeley, Reverend Ambrose Carroll. And the Black Church, Green the Church, is standing at the intersection of the Black Church and the environmental movement. So in our packet, we have a number of references to groups being led by people of color, which we'll share with you at the end of this. And I'm going to go ahead and
For the last segment, we're getting close to the hour, so let's go.
Yeah.
One more thing. The Green New Deal says that the U.S. must become an international leader on climate action. In the process, our economy will grow strong as we innovate and produce the solutions for a new generation.
Yeah, there's a lot to do if we're going to make the Green New Deal a reality. But what can we do?
I find the 3.5% rule an inspiration. Harvard researcher Erica Chenoweth says it only takes 3.5% of the population actively participating in nonviolent protest to ensure serious political change.
The pandemic is creating a challenge for activists, but there's a lot you can do from home right now.
Here is how you can get involved.
For one thing, spread the word about the Green New Deal by telling everyone about this web story. You know what to do. Write your whole email list to friends and family. Ask other groups and organizations to send it out to their list. Post on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, every social media platform you have.
And get your climate message out with a banner drop, or signs in your windows, or posters in the neighborhood.
Get government leaders to take action on the climate and get climate champions elected.
Tell the banks that are funding oil pipelines what you think of them with a Yelp review, or get your friends together and write 50 reviews.
And join a climate group. Community is power. If you are an elder, check out Elders Climate Action or the 1,000 Grandmothers for Future Generations. If you're a bit younger than us, Sunrise is the youth group leading the Green New Deal charge. There's 350.org and Extinction Rebellion and Idle No More and Climate Justice Alliance. The movement is growing.
When it's safe, we'll be marching again. We hope to see you there.
As elders, we hear our children and grandchildren. We join them as allies in the struggle for their future. It is our legacy.
So I know you all know this, but the climate emergency demands that we keep our activism alive. And you've done that by coming tonight. We so appreciate that you joined in for this conversation, but we'd like to hear from you. What do you need to help you feel more successful in this struggle to address the climate crisis? Or what are you working on that you want us to know about? This is the time to let us know. We'd love to hear from you.
You said you had a packet that you send out. Some of the, because I noticed some changes and improvements in your presentation.
Thank you, Mary Sue. Yeah, I am going to show that, but I wanted to give people a chance to if there's something you're working on, you want others to know about, this is a great time to let us know, or we can put something in the chat. Or other responses. Yes.
I have a chance. I have a chance, like even the people that live in my building, to share with them, but I'm not that articulate, and I wish I had a friendly handout, and even though I listen to these panels and I give money to a lot of different groups very generously, I still run into people, my neighbors, and how to make it their idea without them being defensive. But I still think, look what I found. Maybe you're interested. I know I rehearse what I'm going to say, but it never comes out of my mouth because I don't have anything to hand to them.
Well, I'm interested to hear more about what
organization has developed any little handouts. I mean, just even single-use plastics or something. I actually go through the recycling bins and fix them in my building because everybody puts it in the wrong bin, so that disconnect between what they do and how and microplastics showing up in their own blood. I mean, if it's only self-interest, I just think good-willed people would benefit for knowledge, not just by having them go to college more or whatever. I mean, just every day.
Well, that's true.
So on the feedback form, Claire, will you put the link to our packet and the link to our feedback form in the chat, please? So she put the action resource packet in the chat. That is actually posted on the Sierra Club website, but if you go to that link, you'll see it. I'll also see if Elizabeth Hall, who helped send out the Zoom link, will send it out to all of you, both of these things afterwards. I'm sure she will actually, or I will, if you get an email from Martha Kane.
Okay.
But I would be interested, Sue, in hearing more about what you have in mind, because that sounds interesting. Also, I just want to acknowledge that we realize we're preaching to the choir here. Really like to get this out to a broader audience. And, I don't know, Sue, if people in your building would be interested in like our presentation or the 17-minute video. Anyway, we would love to hear ideas about how to get this out further.
Or I'm thinking just introductory, and once that breaks the ice, then I think, oh, I have more. I'll send you a link. Give me your email. Right. If I find the juice is there, I'm not going to waste it on somebody that, I'm going to find supportive people, which I think are tons. They just don't know what the next step takes. I'm not going to talk to somebody that's against it. I'm not going to waste my time on that. But, once I qualify them, I can move up the steps.
Yeah, Liz.
Yeah, so just when we thought we were done writing letters in fund banking last year, we're at it again. The Sierra Club has a letter writing campaign now to write letters to people. At least I wrote letters to people in Arizona and include a registration form so that to make it easier for people in Arizona to know how to register to vote. And then also what used to be called Swing Left is now called Activate America. And they are doing a postcard campaign, and you basically pick a representative who you want to advocate for next year. So I'm writing about Josh Harder here in California, and just sending postcards to people in his district saying, hey, here's the good things he did. And oh, by the way, the Republicans are not supporting this. They're all against it. So there's, if you don't like, flyering, you can always write letters and postcards.
Thank you.
Yeah, these are all the Florida. But like filling them out bit by bit.
Okay, I want to give anyone else a chance to advertise something like Liz did, or to speak up like Sue did about what they need. Yeah.
Well, Sue just mentioned something in the buildings, and my sister-in-law's moved into one, and I watched her throw away all her mixed garbage and everything, all her papers with everything else. And I said, well, next time let's sort it a little bit. Well, we didn't have to do it before. I never thought about it. So I think going into some of these buildings where they have community events anyway, and getting on that would be a very useful thing. So I'm going to work on that.
Mary Sue. Doug, and then I saw Constance.
I think this can be an extremely effective presentation and format for the right audience. And I encourage you to find that right audience. And it's probably not in the state of California. It probably is not effective in the state of California. It's more effective in other locations.
So I brought my sister in from Colorado.
Then I'll say that the presentation was outstandingly human-centric. I clocked you guys at a little less than 30 seconds talking about non-human life forms. Do you have a response to that?
Good point. Yeah.
Good point.
Yes, very human-centric. You're right.
And the 30 seconds that you did give to the non-human life forms, you immediately turned around to human self-interest.
Okay.
So, you know, in my view of what people are doing in the realm of activism and support, this doesn't rise to credibility. I'll just let you know. Then I'm obviously not a grandmother. Maybe the only one that you can look at in the pictures and see that is not a grandmother here, but I'm curious, when you raise your hand and show the number of progeny that you're responsible for, that would be your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren. Can I just do a survey of people that would raise? So in that context, what is the single, by far the single thing that people can do to impact their greenhouse gas footprint? And by a factor of 10, and it ties in great with the grandmother theme, the single most important reduction that we all have in terms of greenhouse gas emissions is our decision to procreate.
Oh.
All the things that we can change in our lifestyle, they amount to less than 5 tons of CO2 a year. If we're Americans and we procreate, we are contributing on average 52 tons a year with that offspring. And then
excuse me, way to shame parents, Doug. I take your point, but you're shaming a lot of people who like want to have children, and there's a lot of other things we can do. So I disagree respectfully.
I'm trying to educate, and I appreciate.
So are we all, but shaming people for wanting to have children is not where it's at. So just saying that. I take your point, but I completely disagree, and you're shaming a lot of like people by doing that. So
and then I'll just wrap up, I know this is contentious because people are basically polarized and not used to constructive conversations about human population. But the underlying basis, one of the very first slides or points that you made was this is about sustainability. And any conversation about sustainability on this planet needs to include human population.
I take your point big time, Doug. I take your point because we have to consider everything. I'm taking a seminar by Loretta J. Ross about calling people in. I look forward to figuring out how to have a conversation with you about this in a constructive way. Because we really do need to look at everything. And Raina, I agree, no shaming, but I think we really need to look at the whole thing, including how much Americans consume and how we bring down consumption in America among the living. So it's a big topic. We're all in it together for sure. And I wanted to go to Martha to have her wrap up thing. I think I have one, but you go, Martha.
Yeah, I just want to share for this last screen. This is the resource packet that this is the first page of the resource packet that we've put in the chat and that we will also send to you. We wanted to leave you with something really specific that you can do leaving tonight if you have 5 minutes. If you look at the second icon there of stop line 3, there is the stopline3.org take action to write to Biden to support the efforts that are going to stop the fossil fuel pipeline 3, to write to the banks that are funding it. So it's a very quick and easy thing that you can do, and maybe perhaps donate. If you want to learn more about the Enbridge pipeline, PBS NewsHour on Monday night had 7 minutes, and I put the link there. And then there's also a wonderful interview with Winona LaDuke, who is herself an Indigenous leader leading the charge against Pipeline 3. We've put a link to the video here. We'd love to have you share it around. And with that, I will turn it back to Virginia.
So you've been great in today's conversation about the Green New Deal as a blueprint, a North Star, a portal into the future. We'd like to end with a South African proverb. One of the greatest mobilizations of the world was by the many peoples of South Africa in the anti-apartheid movement. The South African proverb, Ubuntu, as stated by Bishop Desmond Tutu and President Nelson Mandela, means, I am what I am because of who we all are. So in the spirit of Ubuntu, let's hold the Green New Deal as part of our narrative moving forward. Let's make Ubuntu and the Green New Deal our legacy to our youth and in turn to ourselves and to our ancestors who got us here. Martha.
And let me add all living beings in homage to the point that Doug brought up.
Yes.
Because I think, you know, one of the things that Virginia and I talked about was the need to learn to live on the planet in a more respectful way. And I think that's part of what you're talking about, Doug. So again, we did put the feedback form in the link. You can, in the chat. If you feel inclined to click on it right now and give us feedback, that would be terrific. If you want to click on the action packet, you can see the action packet that I just put on the screen. We really would love to hear your feedback. We're constantly revising this. And you hung in an extra 7 minutes, so we want to thank you for that. So the workshop's officially over. And if you need to go, goodbye. If you want to stay and say a few more things, that's fine. We're going to stay on for a few minutes. But we thank you for coming.